I'm going to be blunt, Tom Pelissero, since you were saying, like, here on planet Earth, interpersonal relationships are difficult. It sure sounds, if I read between the tea leaves, that both sides were sick of each other after all this time. What would you say to that?
And, again, I'd say Pete and Russ talked a lot in this offseason. It wasn't as if this was some, cold shoulder thing where they weren't on speaking terms anymore. They were angry at each other. It just was, it would be unusual. But if, eventually, if, you seem to have a good relationship with your wife and you've been together for 10 years, and then, every January, February, she starts talking about, hey, what if I was married to that guy? At some point, you might go, you know what? Maybe you should be married to that guy. I mean, I think that there's just some of that where it's just that relationship over time. It didn't necessarily fray. It's not like these two didn't like each other. Go back to the meaningless Week 18 game that I believe they won, and those two are jumping around together, high-fiving. Like, they're both highly competitive individuals, but it was time. It was time on a lot of different fronts, and once it made sense for the Seahawks to do the deal, they weren't just going to give them away. Russ wasn't going to, necessarily force his way out. It just, everything lined up, and once that became the case, it became a no-brainer for everyone involved to move forward.
Because if you have, a 33-year-old who's going to be 34 right after Thanksgiving, right? And this is the guy who's been with your team. You drafted him, you nurtured him, you gave him the opportunity. Boy, did he make the most of it. Did he ever make the most of it? And he's so terrific in the community, which loves him. He loves them. He's a Walter Payton Man of the Year award winner because of it. You don't let those guys out of the building, right? You grow old with them. You try again with them. You reload with them. That's the whole idea. And the fact that this hasn't happened here, based on the way that their relationship started, it's kind of stunning. I'll be honest with you. I was there in New York when they won it. I was there in Arizona when they lost it. I was there when they drafted him. Russell Wilson was one of the first guests of the Rich Eisen Show season opening podcast in 2012. Everyone was head over heels with each other, and it's kind of stunning that that's the result. I'll be honest.
Think of it this way, too. If you're processing this from the Seahawks standpoint, just from a completely dispassionate, emotionless roster-building standpoint, you also have a quarterback who's now into his 30s, which, of course, we've seen quarterbacks play a lot longer than that. But, they don't necessarily rely on their mobility as much of a factor as Russell Wilson. He goes in the third round because people thought this guy's not going to be able to see. He's 5'11". You're going to have to design a unique offense. And the Seahawks did an unbelievable job of that over the course of the decade, being able to play a certain way that fit Russ's strengths, and he's a phenomenal playmaker. And that's not to say that he's not going to go to Denver and do the same type of things. But if you are strictly evaluating a 30-something-year-old player and you look at the last, let's call it 20 games that Russell Wilson has played, it hasn't been as good. At the end of the 2020 season, the second half of that, when the turnovers came and they got away from throwing the ball as much as they had early in the season, and there were some creative defensive minds out there, guys like Brandon Staley with the Rams, who really played them different, kind of left certain areas of the field open and took away the deep ball and forced Russ to be a precision passer, short to intermediate, which is not really his game. He's very much he's always played in a vertical strike type of an offense. That seemed to have an effect. We saw that in the games against the Rams. We saw it when another, really good defensive coordinator, Patrick Graham, came in with a plan for the Giants in a game where the Seahawks didn't play particularly well. And then, of course, you have a couple of injuries thrown in there. That was obviously a factor. The finger was a factor. But the point being, if Russell Wilson came out and played the way he has over the last 20 or so games, again in 2022, now what is the value to the rest of the league? In other words, if you have a year and a half of, okay, well, it was injuries, it was a coordinator change, it was other injuries on the team, whatever, you can kind of explain that to yourself. If it becomes just 2.5 years of not high, the highest level of Russell Wilson that we've seen, that's going to impact what you can get for him in a trade. So you figure this is the maximum value we probably can get, 2 1s, 2 2s, 3 players. I mean, that's a lot, and not to mention the fact that even if those players don't work out, they walk in free agency, you get comp picks coming back. It made sense for what the Seahawks were trying to accomplish here.
Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.